He walked away from a pregnant wife. But she returned to his wedding not alone, with quadruplets and a powerful message he could never ignore. Rochelle was the kind of woman who turned heads without even trying. She wasn't loud or flashy, but there was something about her that made people stop and notice. Maybe it was her confidence, or maybe it was the way she always carried herself, like she knew who she was and what she wanted. She had worked hard to reach where she was through community college, late-night shifts at the diner, and hours spent volunteering at the library on weekends. She dreamed of becoming a writer one day, and though money was tight, she never gave up on her dreams. That's when she met Derek. Derek was smooth. He had a voice that could calm storms and a smile that made Rochelle's heart skip a beat. They met at a friend's barbecue. Rochelle was sitting on a folding chair eating grilled corn. And Derek walked over, complimented her laugh, and within 5 minutes had her giggling like a teenager. He had dreams too, wanted to start his own business, maybe in real estate, maybe something bigger. He talked big, but Rochelle didn't mind. She liked the way he dreamed. She liked the way he made her feel seen. They started spending more and more time together. Sunday brunches turned into overnight stays. Rochelle began to open up about her past, about growing up in a strict household, about her father walking out on the family, and how she swore she'd never be with a man who did the same to her. Derek would nod, hold her hand, and say, "I'm not that guy." And she believed him. After a few months, he moved in. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt good. They struggled with bills sometimes, and Derek's job at the car dealership wasn't always stable, but they had each other. Rochelle had started a small online blog, and Derek encouraged her to write more. She even dedicated a few poems to him. They laughed together, cried together, dreamed together. Rochelle was sure this was her forever person. Then one evening, after a home-cooked dinner, Rochelle found herself staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. Her heart raced. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She wasn't ready, but somehow it felt right. She waited until Derek came home from his shift, lit a few candles, and showed him the test with nervous eyes. His reaction wasn't what she expected. He smiled, nodded slowly, and said, "Wow." A baby, but something in his voice sounded off. Still, she told herself it was just nerves. He needed time to process. But from that day, Derek changed. He didn't hold her the same way. He started working late, sometimes disappearing for whole weekends. Rochelle would call, and he wouldn't answer. When he came home, he acted irritated, like she was the problem. She tried to ask him what was wrong, but he would just shake his head and say, "I've got a lot on my mind." She started going to her prenatal appointments alone. She saw happy couples in the waiting room. Husbands rubbing their wives' backs. Boyfriends holding sonogram pictures. Rochelle sat quietly by herself, her hands on her growing belly, trying to be strong. The nurse told her she was carrying more than one baby, twins, maybe more. A follow-up scan confirmed it. For heartbeats.quad. Her first reaction was shock. For babies, how would she take care of them? How would she take care of them? How would they afford it? She rushed home to tell Derek, expecting at least some emotion, surprise, fear, maybe even joy. But when she told him, he went silent for a full minute. Then he stood up, walked into the bedroom, and closed the door. The next morning, he was gone. No note, no text, no call. His clothes were missing from the closet, his toothbrush gone. And the key he always left on the hook wasn't there anymore. Rochelle sat on the couch, still in her pajamas, staring at the empty spot on the wall where Derek's favorite photo used to hang. Her hands moved to her belly, which was now beginning to show. She felt dizzy, hurt, confused. Why would he do this? What had she done wrong? She tried to call. The number was disconnected. She reached out to his friends. Most of them didn't respond. One replied, "I haven't heard from him either." She even messaged his mother on Facebook. No answer. It was like he had vanished. Days passed, then weeks. Rochelle had no time to cry for long. Her body was changing fast, and the doctors warned her that carrying quadruplets would not be easy. She needed to rest more, eat more, avoid stress, But how could she avoid stress when the rent was due and she was all alone? She had used up her savings. She couldn't stand for long hours anymore. Her blog wasn't making enough to survive. She got eviction notices taped to her door. Her fridge had almost nothing but a few bottles of water and a jar of pickles. One night her legs gave out while walking up the stairs to her apartment. A neighbor helped her up and called an ambulance. At the hospital, a kind nurse named Judy sat by her bedside and asked if she had anyone to help. Rochelle just shook her head. It was Judy who connected her to a local women's shelter that helped single mothers. They found Rochelle a small room in a shared home, gave her warm meals, and helped her sign up for government support. Rochelle cried herself to sleep the first night, not from sadness, but from relief. For the first time in weeks, someone was helping her without asking for anything in return. She began attending support groups. She met other women who had been through similar things, abandoned, forgotten, but still standing. They shared stories, held each other's hands, and prayed for each other.
Oh.
Rochelle found strength in their words. She wasn't weak. She wasn't a failure. She was a woman going through hell and surviving. When the time came, she was rushed to the hospital. The labor was long, painful, and risky. Doctors and nurses crowded around her. Machines beeped loudly. Rochelle screamed, pushed, and cried. And one by one, 4 tiny lives entered the world. 3 boys and 1 girl. Each small, delicate, but alive. The doctors kept the babies in NICU for weeks, monitoring their breathing, feeding, and growth. Rochelle visited them every day, talking to them, holding their little hands through the incubator glass. She named them after strength and hope: Isaiah, Elias, Zion, and Little Miracle. Wrote them letters every night, promising them a better future. Once they were strong enough to leave the hospital, the shelter helped her find low-income housing. It was just a 1-bedroom apartment, but it was warm and clean. She set up 4 cribs in a row, like a tiny nursery. She fed them in shifts, barely slept, and learned how to manage 4 babies with only 2 hands and a mountain of love. Money was tight. Rochelle took on online work during nap times, editing papers, writing short articles, designing custom poems for people. Slowly, she began to build a small business. People started recognizing her talent. She never stopped writing. Her blog posts about motherhood, betrayal, and strength began to spread. Strangers wrote to her, telling her how her words inspired them, and still, there was no sign of Derek. Sometimes, she would lie awake at night, holding her daughter in one arm and her phone in the other, wondering if he would ever call. Sometimes she would hate him, other times she missed him. But every time she looked at her babies, those beautiful little faces that had her eyes and his dimples, she reminded herself she was enough. She had been thrown into the storm, left to drown, but she had swum, not because she wanted to prove anything to Derek, but because her children deserved more. She knew they would grow up one day and ask questions. When that day came, she wanted to look them in the eyes and say, "I never gave up on you. Even when your father did, I stayed, chose you." The love story had ended. The pain had almost broken her. But Rochelle had rebuilt her life not with fairy tales, but with hard work, late nights, and fierce determination. She was no longer the heartbroken girl waiting for a man to come back. She was a mother, a warrior, a survivor, and though she didn't know it yet, her story was far from over, because soon, very soon, fate was going to bring Derek back into her life, and this time, she would be the one in control. Rochelle woke up every morning before the sun rose. Her apartment was silent except for the soft breathing of her 4 babies, each wrapped in warm blankets and sleeping in their small cribs. She'd lie still for a moment, watching them, amazed that she had carried them inside her for 9 months and brought them into this world by herself. There were no helping hands at night, no one to share the crying, the feeding, or the changing. But somehow she managed. Day by day, she had taught herself how to survive with 4 babies. Almost no money and a heart still healing from deep pain, she lived in a small government-subsidized apartment on the west side of town. It wasn't fancy. The carpet was old. The paint was peeling in the hallway, and the heating made strange noises at night. But it was hers. And inside those walls was love, pure, messy, tiring, beautiful love. Rochelle had decorated the walls with handmade paper butterflies and inspirational quotes she had written herself. She hung a small chalkboard above the changing table where she wrote messages each morning like "You are strong" and "Mama's love never runs out." Her daily routine was exhausting. She changed over 20 diapers a day. She fed 4 babies one after another, burped them, rocked them to sleep, cleaned up, spit up, sang lullabies, and then repeated it all again. She had no regular babysitter, no friends nearby who could help, and no family to lean on. But Rochelle had learned to work smart. During nap times, she opened her laptop and worked as a freelance writer, taking any job she could find: product descriptions, greeting card, quotes, blogs for businesses, anything that paid. Even on the hardest days, when her eyes were red from lack of sleep and her back ached from carrying babies all day, Rochelle smiled, because every time one of her babies cooed or grabbed her finger, every time they looked up at her with those round eyes and soft little sighs, she felt something that gave her strength, a love deeper than any heartbreak. She no longer thought about Derek every day, not like before. At first, after he left, she used to stare at the door at night, hoping he would return and say it was all a mistake. Then came the anger, long hours of crying, yelling into her pillow, wondering how he could walk away so easily, but slowly the sadness became quiet. She stopped checking his social media. She stopped asking mutual friends about him. In her heart, she started closing the door to that chapter. But every now and then, she would wonder, did he even know their kids were born? Did he care? Was he out there living a new life while she gave every part of herself to raise 4 children? Alone? Rochelle didn't have time to chase those answers. Her babies were growing fast. She celebrated every little milestone like a holiday. The first time Isaiah rolled over, she cried tears of joy. When Miracle laughed for the first time, Rochelle recorded it and played it over and over. She taught herself how to make baby food. At home, she learned how to shop with coupons, how to stretch 1 pack of diapers for as long as possible, how to turn thrift store baby clothes into cute outfits. And even through the struggle, Rochelle found happiness. She made friends in an online parenting group, other mothers who cheered her on and sent her helpful tips. One woman from the group, Lisa, even sent Rochelle a used double stroller. She turned into a quadruple stroller by attaching another one behind it with zip ties and rope. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. Rochelle laughed the first time. She pushed it down the sidewalk, a strange-looking baby train that turned heads wherever she went. Strangers often stopped her on the street. "Are they all yours?" they'd ask, wide-eyed. "Quadruplets. You must be Supermom." Rochelle would smile politely, not wanting to explain her story to everyone she met. But sometimes she felt proud, not because her life was perfect, but because she hadn't given up. The shelter that had helped her during her pregnancy invited her back to speak at an event for struggling mothers. Rochelle stood in front of a small crowd, nervous at first, but then found her voice. She shared her story, how she had been abandoned while pregnant with 4 babies, how she had no one, and how she had rebuilt her life from the ground up. By the end of her talk, several women were crying. A few came up to hug her. The director of the shelter pulled her aside and said, "You have a gift. You should write your story. Share it with the world." Rochelle thought about that all night. She went home, put her babies to sleep, and opened her laptop. She began to write. Not just about her pain, but about her journey, the strength she discovered, the lessons she learned, the love she found in motherhood. Her words were raw and honest. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She posted the first story on her blog and shared it in a few online groups to her surprise. The post went viral. People from all over the country began reading and sharing her story. Comments poured in. Some people praised her strength. Others shared their own experiences of abandonment and healing. A single mother in Georgia sent her baby clothes. A church in Chicago offered to donate diapers. Rochelle was overwhelmed. Not just by the kindness of strangers, but by the realization that her story mattered. Soon, a small magazine reached out and offered to pay her for a personal essay. Then another blog wanted to feature her. Rochelle's name began to spread, and with it, opportunities grew. She started making a decent income from her writing. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to breathe a little easier. Still, there were hard days. Days when 2 babies had fevers at the same time and the others wouldn't sleep. Days when she sat on the bathroom floor, crying silently while holding her daughter close. Days when she missed having someone to lean on, someone to carry even a small piece of the load. But Rochelle had changed. She was no longer the woman who begged for love. She didn't sit by the window waiting for someone who had left her. She had become her own strength, her own rescue. And then one day, something strange happened. She was scrolling through Facebook during a short break while the babies napped, and a photo stopped her cold. It was a group picture at a rooftop party. Balloons, champagne, fairy lights, and in the center, smiling and holding a wine glass, was Derek. Dressed in a crisp suit, arm wrapped around a woman in a designer dress, the caption read, "Engagement party for Derek and Vanessa. Love always wins." Rochelle stared at the screen. Her hands trembled. She clicked on the woman's profile. Vanessa, a real estate agent. Successful, stylish, picture perfect. The photos showed a happy couple, vacations, fancy dinners, a shiny diamond ring. Rochelle felt like the air had been knocked out of her chest. Derek had moved on. Well, not just moved on, he was living a life he'd never offered her. A life filled with comfort, wealth, and love. But not with her. Not with the mother of his 4 children. Not with the woman who stood by him when he had nothing. As she sat there in silence, something inside her began to rise. It wasn't even heartbreak. It was something deeper. A sense of betrayal so strong it made her clench her fists. He had abandoned her while she carried his children, lied to her, disappeared, and now he stood smiling in front of cameras. Pretending like his past didn't exist, Rochelle wanted to scream instead. She stood up, walked to the mirror, and looked at herself. She didn't see a broken woman anymore. She saw a mother, a provider, a fighter. She saw someone who had survived what most couldn't imagine, and suddenly she knew. She wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. If Derek wanted the world to believe he was a good man, he was going to have to face the truth first. Rochelle wasn't planning revenge. She didn't want to ruin his life. But he didn't get to erase her from the story. He didn't get to pretend that the 4 little lives sleeping in the next room didn't exist. So, she began to plan. She didn't know when. She didn't know how. But something told her the day would come when she would stand in front of him again. Not as a begging woman, but as the mother of his children, as the woman he had left behind, who had returned stronger than ever. And when that day came, he would have no choice but to see what he had thrown away. The countdown had begun. Months passed since Rochelle had seen Derek's engagement party photo. The shock of that moment had turned into a quiet fire inside her, a determination that burned brighter every day. She spent her mornings with the babies, her afternoons writing, and her evenings planning quietly for what she knew was coming, the moment when Derek would have to face the truth. Life with 4 babies was a whirlwind. The children were growing fast now, crawling, babbling, and even walking with unsteady steps. Rochelle's apartment was filled with toys, colorful baby clothes, and a chorus of tiny voices. There were endless diaper changes, sleepless nights, and a mountain of laundry that seemed impossible to finish. But through it all, Rochelle found joy in the little things, a first smile, a new word, a hug that made everything feel right. She was also working harder than ever. Her blog had become popular, and she was writing articles for parenting websites, local magazines, and even starting a small book project about her experiences. Money was still tight, but for the first time, she felt like she was building something real, not just surviving, but moving forward. One day, as she was pushing the quadruple stroller through the park, a woman approached her. She was well-dressed, warm-eyed, and introduced herself as Vanessa, the same Vanessa who was now engaged to Derek. Rochelle's heart skipped, but she stayed calm. Vanessa said she wanted to talk. She'd heard about Rochelle through mutual friends and felt she should reach out. "This isn't easy for either of us," Vanessa said softly. "I want to understand. Your side?" Rochelle listened. Vanessa admitted she hadn't known the full story about Derek's past, that he had told her only part of the truth. She seemed genuinely surprised, even upset. But she wasn't here to cause trouble, Vanessa said. She wanted to find a way to support Rochelle and the babies, to help make sure they were taken care of. Rochelle didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to trust Vanessa, but the other part was wary. Could she really believe someone who was involved with the man who had left her so cruelly? Still, Vanessa's offer was unexpected. After all, Rochelle needed help. Financial, emotional. Anything to make this journey easier. Over the next few weeks, Vanessa sent groceries, diapers, and even a babysitter for a few hours each week. She connected Rochelle with a counselor and helped her find a better apartment with more space for the growing family. Rochelle began to see Vanessa in a new light, not just Derek's fiancée, but a woman trying to do the right thing. But Derek himself was still absent. Rochelle often wondered what he was thinking. Was he proud of the life he had built without her? Did he know how much they struggled? Did he regret leaving? Every time she saw a photo of him on social media, laughing with Vanessa or at a business event, her heart clenched. One afternoon, while rocking her daughter, Rochelle received a call from a lawyer. The voice on the other end was calm and formal. Derek wanted to meet. He wanted to talk about custody, about his children. Rochelle's mind raced. After all this time, after everything he had done, he suddenly cared about being a father. Was this a trick? A way to control her? Or maybe he had finally realized his mistake. She agreed to meet, but only with a lawyer present. They chose a small, quiet cafe downtown. When Derek arrived, he looked different than she remembered, older, more polished. But there was a nervousness in his eyes. He apologized. Not just once, but several times. He said he had made mistakes, that he was ashamed of leaving her when she needed him most. He explained how he had been scared of responsibility, scared of failing. He said he had built a new life, but something inside him always told him to come back. Rochelle listened, but didn't let herself be soft. She told him how hard she had worked, how she raised their children alone, and how she didn't need his pity. She wanted to know what he was planning. Did he want to be part of their lives now? Was he ready to take responsibility? Derek said, yes. He wanted to be a father. He wanted to make things right. But Rochelle had learned to be cautious. She agreed to let Derek see the babies, but only under supervision. She wanted to protect her children from hurt. She wanted to see if Derek's words matched his actions. Over the next months, Derek showed up for visits. He brought toys, read stories, and slowly began to build a relationship with the babies. At first, the kids were shy, clinging to their mother, but slowly they warmed to him. Rochelle watched carefully. She saw moments of genuine love and moments of awkward discomfort. Derek was learning how to be a father, but things were not easy. Vanessa was watching from the sidelines, often texting Rochelle, sometimes friendly, sometimes cold. The tension between the two women was real, two very different lives connected by the same man. At one point, Derek confessed that he was torn between his old life with Rochelle and the new life he had created with Vanessa. He was afraid of hurting both women, of losing everything. Rochelle told him plainly, "You made your choice when you left. Oh, you have to live with it." She was tired of being the wounded woman. She was stronger than ever. She had 4 beautiful children who depended on her. She was done letting Derek's mistakes define her. As the months passed, Rochelle's writing career blossomed. Her book was nearing completion, filled with stories of heartbreak, hope, and motherhood. Publishers showed interest, and she was invited to speak at parenting conferences. She was becoming a voice for women who had been abandoned, who had been told they couldn't survive one day. While preparing for a big event, Rochelle received a message from Derek. He wanted to talk, really talk about their future, about co-parenting, about how they could make this work for their children. Rochelle smiled. She wasn't the same woman who had cried alone in that apartment. She was ready to face. Derek, ready to stand tall for her children, ready to write a new chapter. But this time, she would do it on her own terms. The story wasn't just about pain anymore. It was about strength, forgiveness, and building a family no matter how. Broken the past, and the best part? Rochelle knew the future was hers too, right? Life had changed so much for Rochelle, but it still had its twists and turns. The relationship with Derek, her baby's father, was complicated. She never expected it to be easy, but she was learning how to handle the unexpected with courage and patience. Over time, the visits Derek made to see the babies became more regular. At first, it was awkward. The babies didn't understand why this man who had left them was suddenly showing up. They clung to their mother, staring wide-eyed. At him, Derek felt like a stranger in their little world. Rochelle watched closely during those visits. She wanted to make sure Derek was sincere, that he wasn't just there to make himself feel better, or to show Vanessa that he still cared about his past. She saw moments when Derek struggled how to hold all 4 babies, how to calm them down when they cried, how to keep their little hands from pulling at his suit. But she also saw moments filled with love. Derek's eyes lit up when Isaiah laughed, and his face softened when Miracle reached for his finger. Slowly, the babies began to recognize him. Their faces would light up with curiosity, and sometimes they'd even reached for him. Derek would sit on the floor, playing peekaboo, singing silly songs, and trying to be the father he had never been before. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't always smooth. Sometimes the babies fussed and he didn't know what to do, but he was trying. Meanwhile, Rochelle was trying to keep everything balanced. Taking care of 4 babies was hard enough, but she was also writing her book, doing interviews, and attending events that were helping her voice be heard by more people. Her story had become an inspiration for many, and she felt proud of how far she had come. But balancing all this wasn't easy. The stress was heavy on her shoulders. Some days she was exhausted, feeling like she was drowning in diapers, baby cries, and deadlines. She missed having a partner to share the load. She missed the idea of family, the simple things like someone helping with the dishes or holding a baby while she rested. At the same time, the tension between Vanessa and Rochelle grew. Vanessa was part of Derek's life now, and she wasn't shy about it. She sent messages, sometimes friendly, sometimes cold. Vanessa's life was very different from Rochelle's. She lived in a beautiful house, wore expensive clothes, and attended glamorous parties. Vanessa didn't understand the world Rochelle lived in, the world of struggles, sacrifices, and single motherhood. Despite this, Rochelle tried to stay above the conflict. She was focused on her babies and her future, not on drama. She didn't want to fight Vanessa, but she also wasn't going to back down if Vanessa crossed a line. One evening, Rochelle received a message from Derek. He wanted to meet and talk about their co-parenting arrangement. Rochelle was cautious, but agreed. They met at a small coffee shop, one chosen because it was quiet and neutral. Derek looked nervous but determined. He apologized again for the pain he had caused. He said he had been selfish and scared, but now he wanted to make things right, not just for himself, but for the babies. He asked how they could work together to give their children a happy, stable life. Rochelle listened carefully. She told him she wanted the same thing, a good life for their children. But she also told him that it wouldn't be easy. Trust needed to be rebuilt, and actions mattered more than words. She made it clear that she wasn't interested in being his friend or partner, just a co-parent working for the kids. They talked for hours, planning schedules, discussing who would pick up the babies, and what kind of involvement Derek wanted. It was strange and new for both of them, but slowly, they found a rhythm. Derek started showing up more often. It's not just for visits, but to help with doctor's appointments, baby showers, and school events. Rochelle saw that he was trying hard, not perfectly, but sincerely. She began to feel a little hope. Maybe their children could have a better life with both parents involved. Still, things were not without challenges. The public attention on there. Stories sometimes made things awkward. Porters and strangers would ask questions, take photos, or try to get interviews. Rochelle valued her privacy and tried to protect her babies from the spotlight. One day, Derek surprised her by inviting the family to a quiet picnic in the park. He had rented a small pavilion, decorated with balloons and signs that said family day. The babies were excited, giggling as they played on the grass. For a moment, Rochelle forgot the past and simply enjoyed the day, a day where her family, imperfect but real, was together. As the months went on, Rochelle's book was published. It was a story not just about pain and abandonment, but about strength, forgiveness, and hope. Readers from all over sent letters and messages, sharing how her journey had inspired them. She was invited to speak at schools and community centers, telling her story to help others find courage. With success came more opportunities. She was approached by a TV show to share her story on a larger platform. She was nervous but agreed, knowing that her message could help even more people. Despite all the changes, Rochelle never forgot her babies. They remained her center, her joy, and her motivation. Every smile, every hug reminded her that she had fought for their lives and for her own. The relationship with Derek continued to evolve. There were still tough days, misunderstandings, and moments of frustration. But slowly, respect and cooperation grew. They weren't perfect parents, but they were trying, and that mattered most. One night, after putting the babies to sleep, Rochelle sat alone, thinking about how far she had come. She thought about the pain of being left behind, the struggles of raising quadruplets alone, and the unexpected journey that followed. She realized that she had changed. She was no longer the scared, broken woman she once was. She was strong, independent, and ready to face whatever life had next. She knew that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or excusing the past. It was about freeing herself from the pain, moving forward, and creating a better life for her children. And with Derek now part of that life, no matter how complicated, she was ready to build a future. The story of the woman who was left alone with quadruplets was no longer just a story of heartbreak. It was a story of hope, resilience, and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. And Rochelle's journey was far from over. The best chapters were still to come. The years rolled on, and Rochelle's life, once filled with pain and uncertainty, began to take on new meaning. The quadruplets, once tiny and fragile, were growing up fast. Each day was a new adventure, full of surprises, challenges, and joy. Rochelle had become not just a mother, but a fighter, a storyteller, and a symbol of strength for many who heard her story. Rochelle often thought back to the day she arrived at Derek's wedding, driving up in a limo with her 4 babies. It was a moment of fierce pride, a statement that no one could erase the family she had created, no matter what Derek thought. That memory gave her strength when she felt tired or overwhelmed. It reminded her that even when life seemed impossible, she could find a way to rise above. As the children grew, Rochelle balanced work, parenting, and personal growth. Her book was successful and had been translated into several languages. She traveled to talk about her experiences, sharing her message of hope and resilience with audiences around the world. She met many women who had faced abandonment and hardship, and they looked to her as proof that life could be rebuilt with love and courage. Derek's role in their lives had changed too. He was no longer the man who walked away, showed up for birthdays, school plays, and family dinners. He worked hard to build a relationship with the children, attending parent-teacher meetings and helping with homework. The journey wasn't easy. There were disagreements and moments of doubt, but the family kept growing stronger. Rochelle learned that forgiveness was a process, not a single moment. It meant letting go of anger, but holding on to boundaries. It meant opening her heart to healing, while protecting herself and her children. She wasn't ready to be friends with Derek, but they were partners in parenting, sharing the responsibility of raising 4 beautiful children. Life still had hard moments. Sleepless nights, school worries, and the never-ending juggle of work and family kept her busy. Rochelle found joy in the small things, the laughter of her children, the quiet moments of reading together, and the pride in seeing them grow into kind, curious, and strong individuals. One evening, after putting the babies to bed, Rochelle sat quietly in her living room. She looked around at the photos of her family on the walls, pictures that told a story of struggle and triumph. About how far she had come from a young woman abandoned and scared to a confident mother who had taken control of her destiny. Her mind wandered to Derek. She wondered how much he had changed, how much he had learned. She thought about the man he had been and the man he was becoming. Despite everything, she still cared about him in a way, a complicated feeling of love, anger, and hope. But she knew that her life was hers now, and she would never let anyone take that away. The quadruplets were a constant source of inspiration. Each child had their own personality: Isaiah, the curious explorer; Miracle, the gentle soul; Justice, the energetic dreamer; and Destiny, the quiet observer. Watching them grow gave Rochelle a deep sense of fulfillment. She had fought for them, and they were thriving. One day, Derek surprised her with a proposal, not a romantic one, but a proposal to start a family foundation in honor of their children. He wanted to help other families facing challenges like theirs, to provide support for single parents and children born into difficult circumstances. Rochelle was touched. She saw this as a sign that their story was bigger than just them. It was about hope for many others. Together, they began building the foundation, using their story to raise awareness and funds. It was a project that brought them together in a new way, working toward a common goal for the good of others. It wasn't always easy, but it was meaningful. Through all of this, Rochelle never forgot the lessons she had learned. She learned to trust herself, to ask for help when needed, and to never give up. She surrounded herself with friends and family who supported her. She continued to grow as a person and as a mother. Her journey from heartbreak to healing became a beacon for many. She was invited to speak on television, write articles, and mentor women who had been through similar experiences. Rochelle's voice became one of hope and resilience, a reminder that even the hardest stories can have happy endings. One afternoon, as the Quadruplets played in the backyard, Rochelle sat on the porch with a cup of tea. She felt a deep peace. Life wasn't perfect, but it was hers, filled with love, laughter, and possibility. Looking back, she realized that leaving Derek's wedding with her babies in a limo was more than a dramatic moment. It was a declaration. It was a symbol of survival and strength. It showed that no matter what life threw at her, she would always rise, always fight for her family, always believe in a better tomorrow. And so Rochelle's story continues, a story of courage, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her children. It's a story that reminds us all that even when we are abandoned or hurt, we can find the strength inside to create a new beginning. The end of one chapter was just the start of many new ones, filled with hope, love, and endless possibilities.